Poetry is always in season here in Chattanooga and the Tennessee Valley. Across the country, it's National Poetry Month. One poet who has joined us here at WUTC from time to time is KB Ballentine. Her latest collection of poems is titled All the Way Through. KB, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you again.
Glad to have you here again, and glad to have you here as always. Tell us more about the idea behind this collection of poems.
I don't write with an idea of a book in mind. I just write poems as they come. And when I get a stack of poems, I think, wow, I really should do something with these. And I start going through them and seeing what themes might emerge. There was one with family, and there were a lot of different themes. Of course, nature typically runs through my work because I'm in love with nature and I would like to get closer to it at all times. And I think we all need to get closer to it at all times. But I faced a series of losses with family and friends, and I think people going through difficult times. Some of these poems came from the COVID year, people getting sick and people losing things, people losing people losing their way, basically. So I noticed there was the theme of loss and the idea of making it all the way through that loss. There is still, for those who remain, we have to do something with ourselves and with what's left.
You've described this as a meditation against forgetting.
Yes.
No matter how painful these losses of which you speak of are.
Right. That's exactly what I think the whole arc of this book is there are things that are lost and we walk through the pain of it, but then there's also joy on the other side.
And key to that is by remembering, we're able to take that journey. By choosing to forget, we never progress along that journey the way that we can and we should.
Right. I hear people say this all the time, and I know Brene Brown has really made a whole catalog of books from this, but the idea of shutting yourself off works if you don't want anything to come through. Not just the fear and the pain, but also you lose out on the joy and the hope and the positivity that's there. So if we forget or if we shut ourselves off, we don't get the fear. Well, I think we do still have the fear and the negativity, but then we refuse the joy that could come. And so I really believe that we just have to travel through whatever sorrow it is, whether it's death or sickness or somebody leaving or whatever it is. I think we really have to travel through it. We can't hide from it. So I think that's the all the way through idea.
How can nature help us navigate that journey?
Nature is healing in and of itself. We watch the seasons change. We see that just because winter's here doesn't mean there won't be rebirth, there won't be growth, there won't be blossoms in the spring, there won't be a full greening in the summer. When we lose leaves and the blossoms die out and all of that, it's a period of rest, and we've all got to have that rest. And then, of course, nature goes all the way through, too. So from the rest, there is that bursting forth of life again. And so I think looking to nature is healing.
How about a poem?
Sure. Happy to read a poem always. No way back to what was. Clouds stagger in March wind, crocuses spearing the field. I tried to save rain in the bowl of my hands, but there's always a flaw, a fissure that lets things go, leaving me empty. I want to offer a coin, an apple, the moon, but nothing is right. When the rhododendrons bloom, when the bees drink from silken thimble cups, I will ask St. Bridget how she unfolded a field, how she escaped forever into the hills where hooded crows echo the skies. How do I stay where the river birch bends over empty creek beds, where tanks crush a car and driver like we used to stomp beetles, where libraries and hospitals burn, ashes like snow? March thunders into a future already cracking like shells smashed onto shingled shores clinging to sand, tide tugging, dragging back to the deep.
How do you see the sounds and rhythms you're observing out in nature as symbols, as signals to these themes in this collection of poems?
When I write, typically it's in nature. I'm usually in nature when I write, but I'm thinking about things that have happened in my workday, in my personal life, with people who are around me, with family, with friends, or even in the news, because some of the things that I mentioned in this poem were things from overseas. And when I sit in nature, I try to think, or I guess maybe I don't think at all about nature. I think it just comes in, because the humming of cars is also the humming of bees. The song of the birds is also the song that I hear people who are full of joy and hope singing, not really singing necessarily, but the positive people who are out there, the people that we need to reach for and look to, hang on to the shining that they bring to our lives.
Talk more about some of these places in this area that stir this poetry for you.
Most of my poems are driven by the Southeast, and so I've got mountains and rivers. I'm originally from Florida, so there's a lot of ocean. When I go back to family or whatever, that's the ocean. The ocean and the mountains call me equally. So I don't know if that's a pull or a pushing together of those ideas. And so I typically reach for those in my wheelhouse first. But when I go other places, because I do travel, then sometimes those things sneak in. And I say sneak because if you don't have the vocabulary for what's in a new place, when I went to California and was with the community of writers out there were so many things I saw, and I thought, I want to write about this. But I didn't know the names of the birds that I was seeing because we don't have those birds here. I didn't know the names of the trees because I hadn't seen them here. So I had to take pictures of everything, and then I had to start looking them up. And so that language doesn't come as naturally to me as something that I live with and see every day. I remember one time I was in a workshop with somebody from California, and I said something about having the rusty breast of a bluebird. And in the workshop, she said, bluebirds don't have a rusty breast, they're all blue. And I thought, what are you talking about? So I looked up a bluebird in California, and sure enough, the western bluebird is all blue. There is no rust on its chest. So I thought that was pretty funny that my idea of a bluebird and somebody else's idea of a bluebird is two different things. So even when you have the vocabulary, if you don't have the image, that plays a part in what you write too.
And of course, in the written or spoken word, you're talking about a bluebird that can paint more than one picture in a person's mind, depending on your perspective about what that bluebird should look like or should not look like.
Right. I mean, I think I'm being clear when I say a rusty breast of a bluebird, but then if somebody hasn't seen that kind, then they're, wait, what? What's wrong with the bluebird? Nothing. They're from the South.
Is it a metaphor?
Right. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. How about another poem?
Oh, sure. This one is called Unfiltered After 50. Fear seized, trapped me once too often. I let it fester, scar an ugly green like the pencil lead a boy jammed in my thigh in 7th grade when I wanted to open my mouth, sing about moonstone and malachite, ghost of the writer already breathing in me. But my tongue furred, jaw clamped, then rusted shut. I wished I lived when monks inked parchment and vellum, quills scratching and tapping in forgivable silence. The woodpecker, now my totem, unrepentant in her brash staccato, commanding her space, boundaries extended as she needs, her perforation of trees unmistakable, a wild castanet, unquenchable.
Who are some poets that you think of when you're writing?
I read a lot of poetry. I read a lot of everything. But I think because I read a lot, they're already in me. And so I'm not thinking of them, but I'm sure I am. I'm sure they're making their way through me and my writing. So I don't try to write like anybody but myself. I try to have my own voice. But then sometimes people are like, oh, well, that reminds me of Mary Oliver, or oh, that reminds me, And I think, oh, that's a really big compliment. To be reminded of anybody is really nice.
You play with that early on when you write about muses.
Yes. I think Beth Paulson is the one that I was imitating at the time. She wrote a poem, and she wrote a definition of a word. And I thought, that's really cool. And I did that, and I've had that poem for a really long time. And when I was putting this collection together, I thought, we need to think about the muse and something that descends or appears or whatever to us, and then we take it in and let it work through us. And then again, all the way through, I thought this is going to be where this poem needs to go. And it's the first poem of the book, which sounds really weird reading it out loud. That's one of those poems that you have to read on the page. It's not a performance poem. It's an on-the-page poem.
What reflections from what you've written in this collection of poems, what reflections are reverberating with you now at this moment?
I was writing about loss of other family members, and some of what I wrote was about sickness. And my father had been sick the last 2 years. And I think I preempted what I was going to feel by writing some of that. I have way more poems now. He just passed in January. So when I go back and read these, I'm like, wow, that sounds like it's about my father. But it's not. It is because he was sick, but it's not. It's about somebody else. I've lost other family members and other friends. But then that just goes to show that loss is universal and can be spoken about anybody.
And I'm sorry for your loss,
Thanks.
your family's loss.
Thank you.
Your mom's loss.
Yeah, I have a lot of poems now that are pretty sad, probably. They won't all go in the same collection because I think that would be a real downer. And I like to write positive poems for the most part.
And this is all part of the journey that
Right.
we have been discussing, opening yourself up and letting nature and the life we live flow through and letting those experiences flow out however they do on the
Right.
page.
Right, exactly.
Even right down to how you decide to sequence poems together within the collection and within the subsections.
Right. The business of poetry is way harder than writing the poetry, in my opinion. It's got to hold together as a collection, but a lot of people don't read from the beginning to the end. But when I put it together, I try to put it together from beginning to end. So it's one of those really weird things that, okay, all the poems can stand by themselves just fine. But if somebody wants to read them from front to back, I want them to go in a particular direction. But you can definitely drop in and read any of them at any point, and they would make sense.
And for people who want to learn more about All the Way Through and all the poetry that you do, where can they go online?
Sheila-Na-Gig. So it's a great Irish term.
You're going to explain what this means.
Well, a Sheila-Na-Gig is the female fertility symbol in Ireland. So you have the Green Man. Everybody usually knows about the Green Man of Ireland, but Sheila-Na-Gig is typically the female fertility symbol. So it's SHEILANAGIG, Sheila-Na-Gig blog.com.
All right. KB, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ray. I really appreciate it.
Same here.